Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leaving a Rich Legacy podcast with Jessica Rich. I am so excited to talk to you today about relationships and taking ownership of our part of those relationships. So, in episode 7, I interviewed LaTanya Smith, who is a newly divorced mom, and she is a coach who really helps women with that transition, not only for themselves, but their children as well. If you have not listened to that podcast, and even if you're not a newly divorced mom, even if you're not a mom, there are so many different gems that she shared that I think will be impactful and really, really beneficial for women who are married, divorced, engaged, as well as single. So you definitely want to check that out. That's episode 7 of the podcast. But today I'm going to kind of follow up on the podcast and some of the things that we talked about. And I'm going to talk about it from more of the perspective of taking ownership for the relationships that we're in. One thing LaTanya mentioned was we get so caught up in actually dating potential. I have been guilty of that many times. In my most recent relationship, I've been guilty of that. Not only the potential that I saw, but the potential that the individual communicated, and they were not showing any action towards it, right? And you will hear a lot of people talk about it's so important when you're dating not to share everything that you desire, because someone will absolutely show up as their representative and they will tell you everything you want to hear. Not saying that was the entire case with this relationship, but I expressed my heart's desires, what I look for in my partner. But then also I saw potential, and then I'm listening to what this person is telling me the potential that they have and where they want to be. But I think what I learned from that situation is if the person never changed today, right? If they never financially progress, if they did not progress, in their careers, if they did not, I wouldn't say change their personality, but grew to be more mature or grew to work through effective communication, can I spend the rest of my life with them? And that last relationship really, really taught me that I need to be very intentional about that. And I need to really, really focus on my happiness and walking away very early on. And in episode 7, we talked about the potential, right? We see the potential in the individual, and if they get there, they'll be just amazing. But what about where they are now? Are they amazing right now? Can you see yourself with them for the next 5-10 years where they are right now? The conversations, what type of conversations are you having? Just because the person may have a educational background or a upbringing or even the financial means to support the financial lifestyle that you want, is there still potential that you are holding on to that person will become, even emotional available, right? Like if that person is not emotionally connected to you right now, but you see that it could happen, that's still holding on to potential of what they could be. And I know for myself, I've done it time and time again. And it's a lesson that I've learned, and I've taken ownership in that part, because in some situations I had some resentment. So I definitely think it's important that we acknowledge when we are attracted to our partners and we get into a relationship or a situationship based on potential. And then we really, really cannot be upset when things don't go our way. Another really, really good point that we talked about in the episode was like owning our part in the relationship. And what really resonated with me is, there has been times that I have dated guys and then we didn't necessarily like date after, but it was somewhat of a situationship where there will be times where we don't even see one another, right? We're just communicating by text message or by phone. And I kind of let those relationships, because it's still a relationship, I let those relationships drag out far longer than I should have. And then, when I thought about my therapy and me having a conversation with my therapist, like, why did I allow that to happen so many times? And that sometimes it'll be overlapping, right? Because if all I'm doing is communicating with those individuals, they're not here. We're emotionally connected, right? There's some type of investment where we're talking sometimes every day, every other day. Like, why did I allow myself to stay in those situations for so long? And the conversation my therapist and I had was, it was a pattern that was from the relationship that I longed for as a kid with my dad. So my parents divorced. I've shared this on the channel before. My parents divorced when I was 11 years old. And at that time, my mom, my sister, and I, we moved out. And I would go to my dad's house every other weekend. My mom and dad just alternated. My dad kept the boys, my mom got the girls, and then every other weekend we would spend time at the others' homes. But my dad working through his own, childhood trauma, and he was such a workaholic. He always worked two jobs as long as I can remember. There were things that I needed as a child that I did not get from that relationship. And what I've learned now is, well, he didn't have the capacity and he just didn't know, but it affected my relationships with men. So I would hope that these guys that I dated would become the guys that I would hope they would be, or come around for the relationship. And I could think of one where I didn't want a relationship with him, but we had become so emotionally connected that we were good friends, I would say. And then when I finally stopped talking to him, we really were not good friends, but there was their emotional connection because we communicated so much, we shared so much, we could relate to so much. But then I thought about the pattern of these guys and me continuing to communicate or interact with them. Why? And it was because of the relationship or what I was wanting from my dad. And that was that young girl inside of me, that little Jessica, still having hope and dreams that it will come true from my dad. And I gave those guys the benefit of the doubt. I hoped and dreamed that they would become who I wanted them to be, or give me the relationship that I wanted. And even for the one that I didn't want the relationship for, there was something there that helped me, that held me to that situation because, I did the same for my dad, right? So really thinking about our childhood trauma and identifying those patterns in the why, because a lot of times it's not just, oh, I wouldn't say because I'm just silly or I don't make good decisions. There's something that's deep rooted that would allow me to stay connected to these men. And over time, as my therapist and I talked about it, she was like, you have got to recognize that you had one situation where it went for years, and over time, you slowly cut down the time that you would allow these guys to have access to you, communicate to you. You got to acknowledge the progress. And I never looked at it that way. I was just why did I stay so long? Why did I deal with them so long? Why did I tolerate it for so long? And then when she put it that way, I was like, wow, without therapy, I naturally started to recognize, I got to let this situation go. I need to stop communicating with that individual. But I had to take ownership in my part of me, interacting with someone for so long. I can tell you right now, there was one guy, I think maybe 8 or 9 years that we met, and we dated at one point, and then we became friends, and then it was just an emotional connection because we were always communicating. And we talked about so many things that were about life and work and other things that we just became really, really connected. And then when things then went left, and there was a disrespect in the friendship, then I let it go. But even thinking about that, I dated him. Why are we still friends? But it's that hope and dream of who that individual is, and you want to see them do well, you want to see them succeed, and all these other things, and it's all rooted in childhood trauma. So I take ownership of that in my part. I can't blame it all on them. They didn't string me along. They didn't give me, false dreams and promises, which I'm sure some of them have, and they did. But, I take ownership in my part of that because I should have walked away, but I was not healed and in a place where I could identify the patterns, why I was staying, and then I needed to walk away. So that's definitely one place where I say I took ownership. Also, ownership on me settling. And when I say settling for some of these individuals, and financially, I've dated guys who were financially stable, who made six figures, who, were business owners, who did pretty well for themselves. And I've also dated guys who may have not been on that end of the spectrum. So made less than $100,000, really didn't have aspirations to do more. And I can't say one was better than the other. I'm going to be completely honest. I can't even say when it comes to dating, the dates themselves, one was better than the others because it just really depends on the individual. But in those situations, like I was hoping for more. Either it be more initiative when it comes to dating and being creative and wanting to do different things other than just go out to eat, or there were conversations about finances, which, is a huge non-negotiable for me at this point. But it was conversations about, finances and them basically not being able to afford to date. It's how I perceive it. And then also, like, even if the person just didn't have the goals and the goals and ambition and drive to want more, I may have stayed around. And then there's that resentment, and it's another self-reflection. Okay, the person showed you who they were. You decided to stay. At the end, they were still who they always were. What was the difference? And it goes back to the potential, and it goes back to me like holding on because of the relationship and the things that I hoped and wanted to see potentially change with my dad. And then I brought those into my relationships. But it is so important that we identify the part that we play. It's so easy to point the finger at the other person and say, they didn't do this, he didn't do that. And sometimes it might be true. However, if he didn't do those things 9 months in, you got to roll back to 2 months and 3 months and 4 months. Like, when was the first sign? And then when did it happen a second, a third, and a fourth time, and you didn't walk away? And at that point, the finger no longer is only solely pointed at that other individual. Like, you have to take ownership for the fact that you stayed. You decided to stay. And whether it's that the potential, you desire to be married and you're like, I can overlook it. You desire to have children, I can overlook it. Or in my situation, I dated someone who we both desired to be married and have children. And I think we both kind of settled. I'll give some credit to him. I think we both settled because as individuals, I'm not even sure we really liked one another. When it came down to the end of it, I no longer liked him for who he was. And I don't know if that's really all about me never liking him, but I think he made it hard to be likable because of some of his trauma and the triggers that he would always respond to. But overall, we have to take ownership, ladies. We cannot point the fingers at everyone else except ourselves. It's important to heal, whether that's healing on your own, going through therapy, which there's so many resources now that can support us and really, really help us tap into why we accept, tolerate, make excuses, settle. Why we don't think we're worthy of more than what we're getting. Some men will put in your mind that you can't do better. Why are you accepting that? You have to know your self-worth and you have to love yourself. And the only way to get through that is healing. And I think a lot of that healing, really should go through a therapist. And there are so many resources now that provide support that it's not, always people say it's so expensive. It's not. It really depends on if you have insurance. There are some resources that are based on your income. You deserve to heal and understand why you accept some of the things that you accept, not just with romantic partners, but from family and friends too. But, if you desire more from a relationship, don't be afraid to tap in and heal yourself. So when you meet your partner, you are in a better state where you can know how to communicate. You understand your triggers. So if something's said, you don't automatically take it the wrong way. That's something huge that I've learned. And you deserve that. If you desire to be married and have kids and you want a family, like, think about the generational legacy that you want to leave and the patterns that you want to break. Because more than likely, whatever you're doing, you've seen it happen in your family, or it wasn't talked about. So I really, really think it's important that you heal. Coaching is so important. I'm a certified life coach, and life coaching, I do help women become a better version of themselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. But a part of that is like tapping into healing. I'm not a therapist, but we do talk about those patterns, and we talk about loving yourself, self-love, self-care, self-worth. You understanding that you were worthy and deserving of everything your heart desires, and you don't have to settle because society has told us that you got to be married. by this age, if you don't have children, you're not successful, or you're not settled, you're not established. And I've come to accept that when people ask me about being married and children, I'm like, I refuse to settle. Like, I know my worth. I know, all of the work that I've done to get where I am, and I refuse to settle and let someone come and disturb my peace. So coaching is also really, really important. And then get to know yourself, right? Really get to know yourself. And coaching and therapy is going to take you through this anyway, but really, really get to know yourself and why you do some of the things you do. Put the mirror to your face. When we take ownership, it's easy to kind of like throw out the, oh yeah, I really didn't address this, or I saw the red flags. Talk about, were you a bad communicator? Were you belittling that individual? Were you argumentative? Were you, always had a bad attitude? And even though that may not be your personality overall, acknowledge if you experience those things in that relationship, because you may have had a bad attitude because you really didn't like that individual. But don't only point the fingers on everything that the other person did. Like, take time to truly self-reflect and check yourself. Like, write all those things out. Like, what did you do that contributed to the failure of the relationship? And even though you think you did your very best, like, really self-reflect. Think about it from the other person's perspective and acknowledge those, and then understand why, because some of those things could just very be from resentment. And when we stay in relationships that we don't want to be, we start to resent the individuals. And as a man, when we start to resent, we belittle, we will emasculate him. And the one thing that over my healing journey that I'm learning is communication is so important, and not getting so quick to argue and yell. And when you think about emasculating a man, once you do that, it might be hard to recover. And it's important to know why you did that. Why did you go there? Like, why was that your comeback? Is that something that you need to address or heal? Is it something that happened in childhood? But I wanted to just do a follow-up to episode 7, because I noticed that, the title is for single, divorced moms, but I wanted to be very clear that there's so many gems in that conversation that I hope that women will take the time to listen to if you have not already. But then also I wanted to pull the pieces out about us owning our stuff. Like, we have to take ownership in the part that we played in the relationships, whether that's situationships, relationships that lasted too long, relationships that should have lasted longer, someone that you thought got away, someone who should have gotten away, but still really reflecting and thinking about how you can grow from those situations. And it can not only make you a better person, but a better partner for the next person. Because one of the things that I'm going to ask when I start dating, so I said I'm supposed to be open to dating now, but I am not doing a good job. But one question I want to ask when dating is, what have you done since your last relationship to grow? Like, how are you working on yourself? I want to hear the guy speak to that, because we point the finger so much to the other person that we never talk about. You don't have to go and get into the weeds right away, right? But talk about what you've done, even if you're not the cause of it. Maybe the other person cheated, but what have you done to grow since that situation? And how have you invested in yourself? And that's the way I think that we all should look at it, whether we're married, engaged, or single. But especially for my single ladies, like, we got to do the work now, so that when we meet someone, we're not scrambling to do the work, or there's so many unresolved things that we need to address. But we have to, everyone, we have to own our part in any relationship that fails. And I just had to bring that forward today. So thank you for listening to this episode of Leaving a Rich Legacy with Jessica Rich. If you enjoyed it, please take an opportunity to listen to some of the other episodes that I've uploaded. I am officially on episode 8. I cannot believe I'm on episode 8 already, but this is something that I'm really passionate about. These podcasts are love letters to myself, having the conversations I wish somebody would have had with me when I was younger, in my 20s, in my 30s. But most importantly, I wanna make sure that others listen to these conversations, because you may not even be aware that it's a conversation that you're missing. So you can share this. If you enjoyed this, I ask that you share this. If you haven't listened to the other podcasts, I ask that you listen to the other episodes, because I truly think there'll be a blessing, and there's so many gems, even in the title. If you think that you can't relate, I truly believe that there's something that everyone can relate to in every one of the episodes that have been uploaded. So thank you so much. I appreciate you listening to this episode, and I hope you have a good day.